Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Lionel Saliu. I'm a third year PhD student at Napier University School of Computing.
My name is Jamie Graves. I'm a year and a half into my PhD, and I'm also at the School of Computing doing a PhD.
My first is a pretty provocative question. Could the time that you put into diarying your work in a logbook be better spent doing something else in your PhD?
The logbook itself is a fundamental part of the PhD. And without the logbook, there really is no PhD, I feel, mainly because all the work that stems from the logbook goes into the PhD itself.
I would definitely second that. The logbook helps me remember better the information I went through. Writing it down makes the learning process a bit deeper, say, and it's a way of remembering things as well. You could flip back through a few pages and remember exactly what you were doing that day. Most projects are too big for your head anyway, so you need a way of keeping track of what you've been doing. And I'm not sure digital equivalent can exist, actually.
Okay, so even though you're working in fairly high-tech work, you reckon that
yes,
a handwritten logbook
is better.
Still the best way forward,
Yes, absolutely.
even at this stage of technology.
Well, I find it's the way you learn in primary school was by writing stuff down.
Mm-hmm.
The way you think in primary school is by writing stuff down. And so it's the most immediate natural tool you have to express your ideas and thoughts through a pen or a pencil on a bit of paper. In the way that typing is something that we learn later on in life, and therefore it's not as natural to us, writing down is a far more natural method of thinking on paper or thinking out with your head.
I find it particularly difficult to actually type straight into a word processor or equivalent directly on the computer. I just can't do it.
Yeah, I've noticed you writing stuff in your logbook before you put it down on.
That's correct.
Right. So do you write out everything in longhand in your logbook before you type it into a word processor?
Well, pure, how to explain this? When I jog ideas down, I do it on a separate piece of paper. When the idea is a bit more formalized, say, a bit more clear, I put it in the logbook. But I do have in my logbook the main themes of whatever it is I'm writing, which is a paper, a piece of report, an idea for a diagram. Yes, it would be in my logbook. Now, it's true that when a large proportion of the document is ready on my logbook and I can put it into a digital form, it's easier for me afterwards to fill the gaps and extend on what is already in digital forms. But I hardly ever start straight in a Word document or a LaTeX file or whatever.
So you plan it and structure it first?
Yes, I would say that.
Jamie, how do you use a logbook in actual research?
Logbook in research allows me to keep a track of the digital media that I'm exploring at the time. A lot of the research we do has now moved and is based entirely on online and searching online archives and journal resources. And so a lot of the time it's following a trail of ideas and a trail of evidence. And by using a logbook, you can keep track of where the trail's going, where it's been, and where it's going to head to. When I'm looking at these digital records, it's very hard for me to take the information in because I'm actively searching through it and I'm not really learning it at the time. So I find that to take a note of it allows me to go back to it later on and review it and properly learn it or expand my notes upon what I've been learning that day.
What would you not put into your logbook?
Absolutely everything goes into my notebook that's related to work and research. I'd put pretty much any thought that I had in there as long as it came into my head and was relevant to my work. or even irrelevant stuff is pretty good sometimes, because it can be a function of your thoughts that day, and it may be useful later on. Put everything in there.
Right, so you would even put irrelevant stuff?
Absolutely, because I find even if you go off on a tangent, you may not think it's work related, but sometimes it can be later on. A lot of it may be junk, but there are some gems that you can keep. And if you're thinking it at the time, and if you want to express it at the time, then stick it in there.
Does that go for you too, Andy?
The content. Yes, I agree. Everything that goes with my work goes into the logbook. Fair enough. From time to time, phone number and address will pop off, but that's it. That's probably it. It really is work related. I also put down results from meeting, whether it is a good thing, like it went very well, or sometimes it doesn't, and I'm trying to put what I felt down just to find out, to maybe clarify things as well.
That's a good point. I take my logbook into meetings. I can at least refer back to them later onwards. One of our favourite methods of doing things is to draw things out on the page, then add layers of information, maybe diagrams or arrows to whatever we're discussing, whether it be an abstract design of a system or not. And although it can be rather confusing later on, it's quite nice to go back, and there's a trail of evidence there to show the evolution of the thought on the page. And I often find some of the most powerful parts of my logbook are the graphical parts, because I can see it immediately and comprehend entirely what it is.
Now, the going back is very interesting, because when you go back, you will have new thoughts. Mm-hmm. Where do they go? Do they go in with the old work that you're reviewing, or do they go up in a new section of the logbook?
A new section of the logbook for myself.
I do not revisit often what I've written in my logbook. However, what I do is, when I review a paper, say for instance, I always try to put it in context with what I've read before. Therefore, if the article in question dismiss a theory that I've read earlier in my work, I would put, well, this article contests the hypothesis of such and such in paper, whatever. This is how I do.
Now, you've come up with a very interesting thought. You say that you don't often revisit your logbook. Mm-hmm. Why then are you writing it down?
Wow, that's a good question. When I do revisit it, I often find what I was looking for. It's a very powerful tool to remember. Now, why do I not revisit it often? Maybe I'm afraid to be disappointed in the amount of information I put in my logbook, and compared to the few outputs I have. And I don't know if it's a proper way of phrasing this, but it will be a fear of all these nifty ideas going to waste. No.
Is writing it down enough? Is that why you don't revisit it?
Is it written down enough? Well, I would say in some instances it's true, because I know that when I discuss research in particular with my colleagues or my supervisors, I can illustrate my arguments by quoting directly the articles I review. I can tell in article 40 in my literature review that they discuss denial of service attacks, for instance, and I am able to do that because I wrote it down in my logbook. So I read it, I formulated my thought about it, put it in my logbook, and archived it in digital forms afterwards. But these three stages made me remember for quite a long time what happened then. Mm-hmm. And since it seems to be working for me, I might not need to revisit it as much as often as I should.
I have to revisit my logbook a lot because I have a poor memory. At least I feel as if I have a poor memory. But as an archival device aside, it's also really good to create new ideas, because I feel in order to have new ideas I need to get the old ones out of the way and on the page. So if I write them down, then they're out, they're permanent, and therefore I can move on to the next topic or idea that needs to be created or dwelled upon.
Now you, Jamie, are interesting because your father kept a logbook and your grandfather kept a logbook.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed any differences in the style between yourself and what your parents and grandparents did?
No, they're equally as messy and as terrible to read. I think the only differences are technical differences. They were my grandfather was an electrical engineer and my dad's a psychologist, so they would write in slightly different ways. So my granddad would draw electrical diagrams, my father would do prose, and I do code, and that's it. But they're as equally messy and equally as disjointed, but probably as invaluable to the individual. I would not be able to understand their notebooks, and I'm sure they wouldn't be able to understand mine, but I can understand mine, and that's what counts.
So the thing you share is the tradition of logbooks and the fact that they're totally messy.
Absolutely.
I don't know if logbook or maintaining a logbook is something that goes from father to son. I certainly know that my father did keep a logbook while he was in the army and being also an electronic engineer. But I think it was more at that time a method of working.
Absolutely.
You work on this particular project, you write down the equation diagram. It's for you, but it's also probably because they had to share information with people on their teams, and the logbook might be the medium to do that.
I agree, and I think that computers have really messed that up an awful lot, and they've created an impermanence of personal information, whereas our forefathers probably had that with their logbooks.
You know what? I think one of the things that keeps me away from having my daily activities have in digital forms is because formatting it on the screen just gets in the way of what you think.
Well, it's not natural, is it?
It's not natural, and I feel like if I feel that this bit is important, right, or there's a problem there, I would put an exclamation mark in a triangle and then just write on next to this. If I was thinking something important and I was typing away, how do I highlight the fact that this bit is probably more important than the bit before?
By pressing really hard on the keys.
Now, you've talked about a triangle with an exclamation mark.
Yeah,
You use symbols and colours.
that's correct.
Tell me about them.
Well, I use mainly three types of color. Blue and black are for the main, say, prose and so on. Green and red are for either very important thought or bits of code that I think are important. For instance, I had to use different type of computing devices for my PhD, and manipulating them is different from our day-to-day computer. And remembering the commands and so on can really be a drag. So I would write the commands that are really important down in my logbook.
Lionel Salu, Jamie Graves, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.